One. Okay, and it is recording. Hello, everyone. My name is Aggie Tutia. I am the founder and co-exec director of the Red Sea. We are a menstrual justice organization based in Seattle, and today I am interviewing with Emily Wicks, who is running for, I believe, 38th District State Rep position number 1. So today we're going to be talking to her about menstruation, good old monthly bleeding, and of course the elections that are coming up. So thank you so much, Emily, for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yes, it is kind of crazy. Like six days until the elections. How are you feeling?
We are getting close. I'm feeling really good, and I'm a little scared to say how good I'm feeling, but I have a good sense for these things. So just gonna, one thing I feel like we didn't do in 2016 was, we were a little bit complacent. So I think we're worried and we're excited, but we're not complacent this year. And everyone is working their butts off, making sure they did everything that they could to get out the vote. So I'm excited that so many people have voted.
Yeah, it's definitely, I can attest to that. I think the New York Times wrote that more than 50% of voters of 2016 have already voted, and it's not even November yet, which is insane.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been great to see the percentages and in making calls, how many people have just already voted and are, just excited and thrilled. It's really been a game changer, I think, this year.
Yeah. All right. So to get started, I think I love asking this question because it's I think it helps stigmatize what we do. And that experience, I think, is just so common, I think, with throughout all of us. So the first question is, what was your first period like?
Well, it's so interesting. I come from a home with a strong feminine household, I would say. So I have my mom and my 2 other sisters. I was the youngest, and my brother who was out of the house. So it was very women dominated. And so we talked a lot about periods, and it was pretty much a regular discussion in my household, especially me being kind of the surprise baby after 6 years. So I was well aware of it. My mom had her period really early on, when she was 9, and my sisters had their periods when they were a little older. So I was kind of in this place where I knew something was going to happen between there and when I was 14. So I was, it was so typical. PE class in 6th grade, and was in the bathroom, and I go, I said, shoot, because I wasn't much of a swearer then. But I knew exactly what was happening, and I kind of laughed because it was just it was the epitome of, I think, what after school special would have you talk about. So it was, I got the resources that I need, talked to my gym teacher. She got me what I needed, and just went out and back to running around the gym, which is what we were doing that day. So it was really anticlimactic, and kind of, I was just super prepared, I guess. But I feel really lucky. I don't think that's the case for a lot of people. But I had a lot of women in my life, and older women in my life, who prepared me for that and made it pretty natural.
Yeah, so normally I think I would follow that up with like, what did you wish you knew before? But it sounds like you already knew so much before. So how did your family prepare you?
Well, and I'll say that there's a lot I think I still wish I knew. I love my mom. She's a wonderful person. But, I also grew up in a very religious family. So I think that there was a lot of things that I would say she didn't always tell me, or maybe didn't, deem appropriate for me to know. And I think, some of the things that I'll kind of, what I wish I knew was, that PMS can be helpful in knowing that you are going to get your period. And weirdly enough, I feel like more so as an adult, I'm recognizing that. And I think, that idea, and we all kind of remember what it was like growing up, like, both girls and boys, everyone in between, embarrassing things would happen. And I think recognizing that that embarrassing things are going to happen, that leaks are going to happen, and that's not something to laugh about or be ashamed of, or to be worried about is okay. And that also, one thing, I never used tampons. I never wanted to, and that was something that I don't think my mom really wanted me to use those, but I always kind of felt ashamed of, using pads or not using what, other girls were using. They were so much more, knowledgeable, but, it really is knowing that that's a personal choice and that that's okay. I mean, I don't think I learned that until more recently, to be quite honest, when I started talking to another friend, and I was like, yeah, I just use pads. And she's like, me too. And it was nothing to be ashamed of, and it was okay that I didn't want to use one product or another. So that's something that I always kind of was embarrassed about. But now I know that you don't need to be.
So speaking of products, like what products are you using right now for your cycles?
I definitely still like pads. I'll use tampons when I absolutely have to, when I'm going to be swimming or something like that. And, I really like, I think it's weird, but I like the wings to protect my underwear. And I have ordered, I think it's the Thinks, is it Lynx or Thinks? The underwear that, yeah, the Thinks, I have put in an order for those because I kind of was waiting to see how they, turned out, but a friend of mine just said that they've been a great product. So to me, being comfortable is really critical. And I've always, certain pads are really comfortable for me. And I just know that I'm going to cover that. So I do like the, long what do you call it, pads with the wings. This is such a funny conversation. I love just being open about our pads so much. But yeah, that's what I use now. And I'm also really interested in trying out the deep. I was super excited watching Lana, and I want to say her last name's Granger, but that might be her stage name, from Broad City. But in her stand-up, she just talked about it, and I loved what she did. She made it so normal and just really discussed what it was, what the Diva Cup was all about. She was a great marketer for it, I guess I would say. To me, the environment is something I've been thinking a lot about, especially like being home all the time with COVID, and seeing just and really feeling how much I use and the trash that I put out there. That's something that I'm a little scared to use, but I'd be interested in how can I lower my carbon footprint personally by choosing other mechanisms. So I've been exploring that as well. So that's kind of why I did the Thinks underwear as well. Something that kind of fits me a little bit more, but I'm definitely interested in the Diva Cup too.
Yeah, I use Thinks as well. And I think it's really great for when you think you're about to start your period, because I really hate just wasting, I now also use Salt Cup, which is a different brand, but it's a menstrual cup. And I just hated when I would like throw away products that were just sitting there for a day and like nothing was happening. So I think the Thinks is a really great alternative, and I've been using it for almost a year now, and I'm trying to get some more, but the colors that I want are sold out and it makes me real frustrated. Come on, Things. There's also a little bit of their CEO, I believe, had some not so great press recently.
Really?
Yeah. I think she was somewhat abusive to her coworkers and colleagues. So I think she's no longer a part of Things, but hopefully, I think they're doing just fine in the overall process of getting things to be more sustainable for our periods.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll keep looking out for ideas.
Yeah, there's just so many new products coming out. There's like the cups, but then these discs, and it's a very interesting time for period products, and even with ingredient transparency too. Like New York State just passed legislation this year for companies to say what ingredients are in tampons and pads and menstrual cups. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes this coming year when it comes to that.
Huge win.
Mm-hmm. I love it. All right. So we talked about PMS earlier. So what are your PMS signals like, and how do you manage them?
Yeah. I get the pain in my lower back. That is, and it can definitely be, um, and just really painful. And I don't think that my level of pain is as much as other folks have experienced. My mom talked about that. And, I've been on birth control since I was 14, prior to even being, sexually active. And birth control was an amazing product for relieving my PMS symptoms completely. So I get a little emotional, and so I can sense that too. And I think I appreciate like I said, the notification of, okay, I'm feeling a little blue, and I'm feeling a little sad. This is, my period is coming. And I think that helps me put kind of where I'm at in perspective as well. And for me, and I'll share this, for the past 2 years, I tried to be off of birth control. The pill is what I was taking, to kind of see, just because I had been on it for so long, I was, curious, how that would feel. And I'm in I'm married, and not that that matters, but I, was prepared that if I did get pregnant, that we would be okay, and we would, have a child, if that was the case. We weren't actively trying. But I actually just got back on the pill because my periods were really difficult. And I think I had forgotten being on the pill for so long and having, pretty minimal pain during my period, that I forgot how bad it can get. So what I've been doing in the meantime, though, is I'll take some ibuprofen, and it's usually one day of really bad pain, but it has been pretty debilitating for the day. And then I will sit in bed and I'll put a heating pad on my back and my stomach and all over and try to get warm. And that's kind of how I worked it. And so those are kind of the quick fixes for me. And I feel like I've been very lucky to have pretty good periods each month, for the most part, but I can definitely attest to being able to have the resources you need to feel better, because it can just derail your entire day if you're feeling bad in that way.
Yes, I completely hear you out. I think it's not really talked about as much as how sometimes like periods can be, some days they can be fine, but usually they can take away an entire day from you.
Totally.
Yes. And it doesn't matter like who you are, like there are so many menstruators out there that we see every day and you don't even know that they could be going through a lot of pain.
Yeah, 100%. And I wanted to add to, I think you in your questionnaire had talked about women in pain. And that is very clear. A friend of mine does struggle with endometriosis, and she has not been able to get the care that she needed. There's this idea that the bias around pain, and not trusting that women are actually experiencing that. And as a redhead, I think I can endure a lot of pain. And so when I tell someone that I am in pain, I expect them to believe me, because that's very, true. And, I was thinking about, that I've had, fairly good periods, but when I was growing up, and every year I would get these really awful migraines that would not really feel painful, but where you, like the visual migraines where you can't see, like I couldn't see out of one side of my eye. And I've gotten them before, but it was definitely, in talking to my mom, very much a part of puberty. And I would get them like a certain time of day. And until I threw up, later in the day, I would not feel better. And that they slowly started to go away after I think I got through, puberty. But there was several times where I would happen at school and I would go and complain, and they did not believe me because they couldn't see anything visual that was happening. And so I would spend time where they didn't want to call my mom, they wouldn't send me home. And so that was just like a very personal experience that when I was young never really equated to puberty and periods and going through that. But that was pretty, the fact that my teachers and the nurses didn't believe me and wouldn't give me what I needed at that time just really is frustrating. And I hope that no one else experiences that. And that's something that I'll want to work against in my position and just in my day-to-day and the work that I do with women.
Right. And historically too, that's been mostly the case when it comes to women and going to the doctor. And it is not good. Not good at all. I think there's definitely, by bringing this conversation to more public spotlight, by having more doctors that they themselves menstruate and they understand what's going on because they can believe it better. Hopefully, like, there can be better changes in how our healthcare system works, especially in schools for students too, when they come in with these problems and not necessarily know how to process and ask for the right help that they need because they're young and still learning.
Exactly. And that brings to mind, sorry, I'm kind of derailing your questions, but
Love it.
it brings to mind the work that we do with the Women's Political Caucus, right? I'm the president of the caucus and been part of the organization since 2013. And we exist to recruit, train, and elect women to public office because we believe that representation is important. And so, this is the conversation that we're having today is like the first I've ever, had on the campaign trail about this. And it's freeing and wonderful. And, women are going to be able to do that. And so that's why it's so important that we have more women in positions of leadership and that are elected because they can speak to these issues. And frankly, our male counterparts that are not experienced, it just can't. And so that is, I think more of this legislation and more of this understanding will happen not only when we get more electeds, but when we have parity in, with our doctors and our nurses and in every aspect of our healthcare and our social services. So I just wanted to put that plug in there, but and so tell these young women that are watching it to run for office and to run for local or for their, at school, run for president because you're more likely to run in the future. If you run in school and for class president, you're far more likely. So this is where it starts.
Yeah, I also want to do a quick plug in too of for people that are menstruators and don't identify as women too, like they should run too. Like their voices matter just as much. And it's definitely becoming a stronger, I guess, more public understanding that menstruation doesn't mean that you're a woman or if you identify as that. And I think just getting more diverse voices in addition to women voices is so important.
Definitely. And I love the legislation you want to work on gender neutral terms and using menstruation, menstruator over women for sure. And the Women's Political Caucus, while we, support women, we actually welcome anyone in who does not identify as a male. And so we are definitely on board with that and want to make periods and menstruation more equitable for all. So thanks for putting that in there. And I'll put a plug in that hopefully we pass R90 and get that approved because that's really critical and would have answered so many of the questions I think that I had or the recess wisdom that I received. I think that's what we call it. And, getting that from trusted adults and others is really critical. And then through that, the effort with our 90 to, respect our LGBTQ students and our transgender students, and to make sure that they are accepted and welcomed and have those resources as well is critical. So thanks for putting that plug in as well. Good conversation.
Of course, of course. So we talked a bit about just general periods, the pain, kind of that the struggle of getting someone to even believe in your pain from a physician. But there are some other topics that we consider to be very important, such as homelessness, incarcerated individual rights, just students and workers. We brought up R90, which I think, yes, vote approved for R90. So just when we reached out to you first, which topics of these were you the most aware about? Like, what level of knowledge did you have on those?
Well, I think I have definitely a general knowledge, and I think we can anecdotally speak to how difficult it is for those with resources and means and access to everything to be able to go to the bathroom, access period products. And so adding a layer of knowing that a child isn't able to get their basic needs met, or an homeless individual doesn't have a place to use the restroom. I mean, if we think about how difficult having our period is for us right now, imagine not being able to get to a bathroom when you need it, not being able to get a product when you need it, and how it has ruins your clothes. It's embarrassing, all of those things. So I've known that products in our shelters are not readily available. We partner every year with Mary's Place in Seattle, and they have a couple of different locations to do some of our women's political caucus events, and they really brought my attention to the need, because they're working directly with women and families to get them those resources. But that's one thing they always are looking for, doing the drives on menstrual products, making sure that's happening. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily happening in all of our food banks and all of other locations to make sure that happens. And so we need to continue that, to express that and let people understand that that's a problem. And with the prisons as well, and lack of access, that is something that I was thoughtful of. But in reading what you shared and some of the research that was out there, it definitely is. I think that it is, prison already is a place where you feel degraded. And I think, far too much of our population as a whole believes that if you're in prison, you don't have those rights, you lose all human rights, which is not true. And so, that lack of sanitary products in our prisons and in our jails, is a tactic that either intentionally is degrading our inmates, or is degrading them unintentionally by creating cost savings. And so that's something that we need to constantly. I love that your ideas in your questionnaire were about coming up with some standards, and I think that that's going to be really critical. And I've had an opportunity to work and to communicate with the ombudsman for the our state corrections department, and we were touching on some other issues, but I did bring up some of this, and I also brought up some of the issues around the ICE detention centers and the hysterectomies that have been reported recently. And I feel like the three women that I spoke to, they were very passionate about working on this on the side as well. So I kind of added a lot into that. But I think there's a number of issues we need to work on when it comes to equity for women, and menstrual equity specifically, for those with less means and those who are incarcerated. So I'm committed to working on those, and I'm really excited to have your group behind me and your insight and wisdom so that we can really address these issues in the months and years ahead.
Thank you for that, Emily. That was, I think, very well articulated, and I'm also processing everything.
There's a lot to talk about. Sorry. There really is.
Yeah, I think it's really, it's fascinating because there can be so many different topics. and directions in which we can address it. Is there a particular topic that you feel like more impassioned by?
Um, Not necessarily, I think for me, I'll say, yeah, I mean, I'm passionate about women's issues and I'm passionate about childcare. That's kind of why and getting those resources and my side work, and what I've been trying to do is create a co-working retail and membership organization that prioritizes women and families. I think from, being in, and this is, related but unrelated, I guess, but being, somebody who grew up thinking I could do anything, and then entering the workforce and really understanding what that glass ceiling looks like, and fully knowing that my experience is a lot better than the women of the past who have helped us get where we are today. Making sure that we're dedicating our time and energy toward measures that create a more equitable society for women and non-identifying men and our transgender community and LGBTQ family and friends. That's going to be the most critical thing. So I look at, I see everything very connected. While I'm not the person that is going to come into Olympia with like, I'm the healthcare person or I'm the environmental person. I'm the person that's going to look at that and prioritize women and our women of color and how do we make things more equitable. So I really feel like I've touched on a lot of different things, and I've been doing that throughout because I was appointed in May. So I've been able to, kind of be doing this work and also kind of running and figuring out my steps forward. But those are going to be, that's what I've decided is my priorities, is like, how do I center women and other groups that have been left out of the process far too often, and make sure that we create a more equitable society. So I've said that so many times, but that's, where I love what I lead with. Hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I can see there being a lot of overlap in how certain like menstrual, for example, like paid time off for work, but having a period that ties into a lot of just general rights as a worker, and making sure that workers are justly compensated and they're justly taken care of. And that's just one facet of a huge undertaking.
Definitely.
Great. So why is menstrual equity important to you, and why do you want to fight for this cause?
And I think I kind of covered that a little bit, having, grown up and, just kind of experienced what I think every young person experiences in school around, having a lack of information, having, feeling different, feeling worried or nervous, and also just how that affects women's daily lives today, whether, no matter who we are, and has a disproportionate effect on us when we have less resources, are living, are homeless, are incarcerated. That's critical. And, making sure that like menstrual health is our health. And if we're not focusing on that, then then we're putting all of us at like a deep risk, and we're not helping our society as a whole, because women are an important aspect to our economy, and making sure that we are protecting their health, and that we are giving them everything that they need to be successful, and every resource is really critical to, I think, creating a successful and a thriving society for all. So those are, that's important to me. And I think, making sure that our young women and the young men, and our transgender youth feel confident in school, and that this is something that they don't have to worry about, so they can focus on being the best students that they can be, the best friends that they can be, and prioritizing that is going to be critical. And so that's why, and for someone like me, who I think, kind of really learned about the inequities that I experienced as a young person, as a privileged, cisgender white woman, and knowing that there was so many inequities and that other people face that is a reason that, I want to make sure that that doesn't happen for others, and that we can continue to grow on that and build on this work. And again, create more equity in our schools. And we can start by making sure that our young women and anyone who's menstruating has those resources. I'm all over the place, sorry.
You're good. You're good. Well, how do you plan to address these inequities in Olympia?
Yeah, awesome. Well, you guys gave me, or your team gave me a great list of ideas and a lot of things to work on. And, I've been on my own kind of championing this idea of, the tax relief by exempting feminine hygiene products from retail sales and use tax. And I was so excited to see that passed, and that is in effect in July. It went into effect in July. And, I was very much looking forward to passing that, but I'm glad it passed before I even got there. And then I loved, Senator Dingra was working on legislation that would require menstrual hygiene products in our public school bathrooms. And that's something that, it got a committee hearing and I think made it through the Senate, but didn't make it through the House. And so I want to work on that and see, kind of identify where the issues were around that, because that just seems like a kind of a no-brainer there. And then you also added, things like making sure that they were in our places of work. I can't tell you how many times, I would go to my very professional job in downtown Seattle and didn't, have the resources that I needed. And so that should be a right in our libraries and other areas that our homeless populations depend on so much. Those are going to be critical. So I want to not only make sure that's happening in our schools, but also expanding that in other areas. I also, again, really appreciated the push toward gender neutral efforts, ingredient transparency, like we talked about, and what was going on in New York. I'm currently on the Healthcare and Wellness Committee and the Environment Committee. So I feel like if I do end up staying on those committees, these are great places to bring those forward. But I also am very much interested in education as well. So nothing will stop me from bringing those things forward. So, menstrual products, these things are just so essential to allowing women to participate in society. And I want to do everything I can using, your skill sets and knowledge to be able to push those things forward. And I'm just, really excited to dive into that and to work with those who have been championing that already and see how I can help.
Yes, I really like the fact that you brought up I think it's SB 6073, which is the Senate bill for getting the menstrual products into public bathrooms at public schools. That is something that we are working on with Washington for Menstrual Equity, and we're getting ready to really go all force in the next coming months. So you'll definitely be hearing more about that. It's just it is, I think, a very, oh yes, this makes total sense. There's just such an embarrassment of when you start your period, you have to go to the nurse's office to get a pad or a tampon, and going to the nurse is usually associated with you're sick or something is wrong. Whereas getting your period is a natural thing, and it shouldn't be something that feels shameful or part of that association of something's wrong. No, this is something natural. So definitely getting that bill pushed into law is, I think, very critical for students today.
Agreed. Can't wait to work on it with you.
Yeah. I'm so excited. All right. So the next portion of these questions are kind of more focused on how can we get people to be more involved in the local political process, because sometimes people are more aware of national politics, but I think I honestly believe that you can do a lot of good change on a local level. So the first question is, what can normal Washington people do to help these new laws get enacted?
Well, I like to tell people this all the time, which, some people are like, don't send, too many emails. But I think emails, during the legislative session and when things are coming up for a vote, I think seriously bombard us with emails. And my legislative assistants would probably say, don't do that. But I mean, at the end of the day, we count those. And that's kind of been what's been used. And I think people on the other side of the aisle often use, the communications that they get from their constituents to justify maybe poor votes, even if sometimes those letters aren't necessarily there from their constituents, or there's, some bots. So I think that there's power in reaching out to our legislators that way, in making those phone calls. There's power in coming to Olympia, whether that's, in person if we ever can, or just virtually. That's going to happen. And I think there's some great opportunities there with, kind of moving into that virtual space, where I love the fact that even if I was in Olympia, you could come and meet with me, and you could, bring your computer, your laptop, and bring all of these, young women that came, across the state to speak about this issue. I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think, social media has been a powerful tool as well. And starts bringing those issues to light for folks that maybe didn't consider that previously. Stories are extremely powerful. And, I think about, when I was thinking about it, like a powerful story for me about what you just mentioned, and getting products into our school bathrooms, just, I worked really hard to, to pass a school bond in 2016 for Marysville Pilchuck to get that school rebuilt. And, I think back on, something that I never thought about before, but the bathrooms, just, there was nothing in there. And there was, cold water, really bad toilet paper, pretty insufficient, blow drying machines, that were in there. And so, those are big, I think, really great things to tie in with menstrual equity as well, is, the quality of our spaces that our children are learning in. And that's really important. And that I didn't really think about that tie until we were talking today about that, and remembering my experiences in the high school and the schools, that I represent. And so I think I just derailed what I was saying, but those are really, I just think those personal stories are critical, and to share those, and to do that in a way, and to just advocate. You can always do that. People are going to listen. They're going to count those emails. They're going to know, if their constituents are concerned about a certain area. So there's power in numbers, and there's power in your personal story. So I'll just, end with that.
Yeah. And for those who are interested in reaching out to their state reps, I believe if you Google Washington state reps, there should be a like a search engine within the Washington state legislation. So that way, I think you just type in your address, and then it'll pop up with your state reps and your state senator. So definitely know who your state reps and senator are, because then you can bombard them with all the emails.
Yeah. www.leg.wa.gov, and there's a little link on there that says find your district, and you can put your address in, and your legislators will come up, and they will share. And there's so many opportunities to testify, and I think we're going to be working on remote testimony this year too, so you don't even have to take a trip to Olympia to come and share your perspective. So I think there's a lot of really positive things that are coming out as a result of the negative of COVID, but we've had to adapt and change quickly, and I think there's going to be some more accessibility issues that we've been able to achieve.
Yes, looking forward to it. What are some common misconceptions that you think people have with local politics?
You know what? It's interesting, and talking to some other folks, I guess, in the, since I've been elected, that, they see our, people in Olympia, and I think, their local legislators and their city and county legislators is really, far away. But I live in my community. I see my neighbors. I'm right here, and I'm really committed to, being responsive and trying to, work through problems and find solutions and find ways to do things better. So I think, we often see our leaders as, these, I don't know if you'd call them stars or just people that are so far away, but we're right here in your community. We're living, the same life that you're living, essentially. I mean, slightly different, but we're experiencing what you're experiencing. And so, I've learned so much from, a variety of people that maybe I wouldn't have come into contact with otherwise. And we have a lot of shared experiences or shared knowledge that I think has been important to talk about. People on other sides of the aisle that I'm like, yes, that's a problem. We both see that. Like, what can we do together to fix that? So I think that can often be a misconception, for sure, that we're just not there to be responsive, or, we just go into this bubble. But what I love about the Washington State Legislature is that we are a citizens legislature. So, we're not full-time, we're not doing this full-time. It's not our full-time job. And people come from the healthcare industry, from the education industry. We have loggers, we have fishermen, we have all our fisherwomen, fishing, the fish pack, all of it. I'm like, yeah, those are other things we need to work on, is, our language. But there's so many people that bring a variety of different perspectives, and not only that, but bring the industry and that knowledge of the different districts across Washington that come to the table. So they're really living that. And if they don't, and I love that, if I don't know something, I'm going to go ask a question of another legislator who works in tech, or another legislator who works, in public health. Or I'm going to get all of those insights. And I think that really creates a rich environment for all of us to have these, to have really important conversations and to get to a good spot. So that's, I think, yeah, it kind of encompasses that. What are our legislators? They're just like us. They just happen to do this job on the side.
It's like a very, very intense passion project.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
So what would you say are the main differences between local and national government in terms of enacting new legislation?
I think it's been really interesting to see, kind of control, I would say, of different things. So, a lot of times, you know, the state can't do certain things that, our federal government can do. And sometimes we're dependent. And I think we're all kind of dependent on each other. And I often feel that way about, our local municipalities that I serve, and the local and county and stuff that I work with. So I would say, from what I see, because I sit here and I watch what's on right now, the news, and I'm watching the, Senate panels. I would say it's a little less. You have a platform at the federal government sometimes, and you don't always get that same platform at the state level. So I think, a little bit difference is just, how are we changing like a state law, and when does that state law need to be a federal law because it crosses jurisdictions, or it affects things differently, or how do you get something done if you need to get something done, doing it piece by piece at the state level, like you talked about, New York and their product transparency and ingredient transparency work, that I think sometimes, the work that the states do are really pushing the federal government to make some of those decisions and to talk about it more broadly. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. That was kind of a tough one when I was looking at it. Yeah, that, I think the states and local governments play a pretty big role in pushing some really meaningful legislation that can happen on a broader scale, and kind of testing the waters and proving that something is beneficial and works. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it sounds like states can act sort of as a think tank in a way. And if it works really well, or if this is something that's, oh yes, we should all have it, then other states replicate, or the federal government will also implement a law of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I hope that Washington State can be a front runner in setting up some standards for the rest of the country.
Yeah, same. I'm with you.
Um, all right. So, how do you plan to fight against the powerful entities that use influence and money to sway your vote and uphold the needs of your constituents?
Well, this is an interesting question because when I first, started running my campaign and serving the legislature all kind of at the same time, I had a lot of questions about, who do I take money from and who do I not take money from, or how do I make those decisions? And I asked for a lot of different pieces of advice. And, one thing that somebody told me, they said, I take money from everyone. And I thought that was really interesting because then I, questioned that. And then I said, well, if you are choosing to not take money, then it proves that money is actually affecting your race. And so, what I do is, I look at the donations or the contributions that I get. If I have someone that's pushing back and saying they really, do not take, and I've signed a no oil pledge, no oil money pledge. So I've chosen not to take that. And because that's something that the environmental community was really passionate about, and I trust that, and I made that commitment. But this money goes to pay for my valuable campaign staff, make sure that my campaign manager, who I love and lives down the street and has two beautiful children, that she's able to get healthcare and to be able to provide that. So I look at that, and I also in my conversations with lobbyists and people, I appreciate their perspective. I'm always willing to listen to ideas, but this job doesn't pay enough to not do the right thing. And so I'm always going to be following my conscience and what I think is going to be best for my constituents, and money's not going to affect that. And if they choose not to contribute to my campaign because of a vote I made, or because of one thing or another, then that's fine. I'm sure someone else will, because they were proud of that vote. So I'm not. I guess it's like, the only thing I can say is, to me, like, my commitment is that I'm always going to be here to serve the people, and to do this job to the best of my ability. And when that becomes something that is ruled by money or special interest groups, then I would need to reevaluate why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I would hope that people would call me out for that too, so that I, would have to be accountable to those decisions. So that's kind of like you got to trust me kind of thing. But I'm here to do what's right. And I think, I've shown that in the leadership roles that I've had in the past, that I'm willing to have those tough conversations, and I'm willing to, and I'm not beholden to anyone. I mean, and I hate saying this, but that's why I think there's some freedom in the fact that I'm like, I can really go do anything else. I have a lot of good ideas and a lot of things that I could do that would make me money, or would be, much less difficult, I would say. You get yelled at a little bit less. So I'm here to do this work and continue that effort. And so I'll do that as long as I can. And as long as I'm doing it in a way that brings that, thinking of the word that I can't remember right now, but brings those ethics into that, and that people can trust me.
Yeah, I think this will tie in perfectly to our last question. I know you get this all the time. Why are you running, and why should we vote for you? And by we, the 38th district.
Well, I am running because I absolutely love Marysville, Tulalip, and Everett. And I don't run unless I believe that I can make a big difference for the communities in which I serve. It wasn't on the docket until I moved back to my hometown, and a variety of things happened here. I'm committed to creating connected communities and doing that through transit, building up our healthcare system, supporting our schools and our local government, and making sure that we are prioritizing our small businesses and making an economy that works for everyone. That's been a big buzzword, but I've been using it from the very beginning. Making an economy that works for everyone, and really recognizing how we, circulate our dollars and how we get people the resources that we need so we can all live a quality of life. And so that's why you should vote for me. I'm out here for the people of my communities. I am going to be passionate about listening to you, connecting with you, and making sure that we can all thrive and be successful here, and then participate in a strong Washington state economy as well. So I feel like I don't want to get too much into my, stump speech, because this is fun and I enjoy it so much, but I'm ready to just work hard and to, to communicate with everyone and fight on your behalf every day.
Thank you, Emily Wicks, for your time, your presence, your joy here today. If I were in 38th, I would vote for you. Easy. Yes, well, that pretty much concludes it. I'm going to stop recording